Okay, so now I would like to turn things over to our MC for the afternoon. Cami Osman is co-editor of today's featured book and the founder of the Narrative Project. She's also the author of several books, including Second Wind, One Woman's Midlife Quest to Run 7 Marathons on 7 Continents, and co-author of 26.2 Life Lessons, helping you keep pace with the marathon of life. She and her fellow editors and contributors are here to present this book right here, the latest volume in the True Stories series, Volume 5. Please welcome Cami Osman.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you so much. I'm going to start out by inviting our editors and our publisher to turn their videos on so that I can introduce all of you. And first of all, before I do that, I want to say thank you to Village Books and their whole crew, especially Claire, for supporting what we do in the Narrative Project and for helping us to make writers' dreams come true. So a few words about this book. The Narrative Project is a program that gives writers everything they need to get their books done. But publishing in the True Stories anthologies, in the True Story anthology is a culmination of a year's worth of work on the writer's own individual book. So each writer has taken an excerpt from their individual book, crafted into a standalone piece. Nobody does this alone. An anthology requires a collaboration of dozens of people to pull it off. There are editors, the publisher, the authors, the designers, the proofreaders. And also we have to acknowledge our families and friends who bring us coffee and cheer us on and all of that sort of thing. So I want to introduce you to 3 people who were central to making this book happen. First of all, Lisa Daly. Wave your hands wildly, Lisa. Lisa, who is our publisher at Sidekick Press, also an author who's worked with us and a dear friend to all of us. So she understands completely how important the journey is for our anthology authors. She gives us the utmost care and is about as patient with our questions and mistakes as a person could be. Plus, she publishes a pretty stinking gorgeous book. I love this book so much. So beautiful. So gratitude to Lisa and Sidekick Press for all that you do to make writers shine. Thank you, Lisa. Yeah. Okay. And next, I want to introduce my co-editors on this volume. Dana Tyrally, wave your hands wildly. Where are you? There she is. Great. She did the true heavy lifting in this book. Dana is a coach for the Narrative Project, an award-winning former journalist, and the author of her own memoir in progress. Dana has a passion for supporting other writers and making their work really sparkle. And that passion shows up in this volume for sure. So Dana, thank you so much for everything that you did to make this book happen. Really appreciate it. And certainly, last but not least, we have Annalise Kamola. Ani is an author and a developmental editor, and in the Narrative Project, she wears a ton of hats. I bet it does feel like a ton too sometimes. So she's coach, client support, administrative maven, among many other things. Her wisdom and care and mad editing skills cannot be overstated. So much appreciation to you, Ani, for everything that you do to give our writers voice and confidence. Thank you. Great. Okay, so I'm going to invite our editors and our publisher to turn their videos off, and I'm going to introduce our very first reader. I would also just to say to the audience, thank you for coming, and I would really appreciate everyone staying to the very end. Each reader has clipped 2 minutes of reading. So we've got this timed. We're going to go through it quickly. And it's really wonderful for the last person to have a lot of kudos as well as the first person. So we really appreciate if you can stick around. All right. So the first reader is August Cabrera. August is completing her first book, A Bad Widow, a memoir of confirmation bias gone wrong. She's an intrepid blogger, and her work has appeared in the Washington Post. Today, she reads an excerpt from her anthology piece, Perspective. So, August, if you can turn your video on.
It is. Can you hear me and see me?
Yeah, take it away.
Right. Life at its essence is simply all the befores until it becomes the everything after. Before the first job and after the retirement party, before the baby and after the college graduation, before the I do and after the till death do us part. In my case, life is all about before I reach the mountaintop at sunrise, holding hands with my husband, and after the men in uniform arrived and regretted to inform me my husband was dead. It's all about perspective. That early September morning in Tanzania was my absolute defining before. It shifted my view of myself as nothing else had ever done. This would be a story I would tell my children and my grandchildren. The day I summited Kilimanjaro, we had taken the longest possible path up the mountain, hoping to give ourselves the best chance to adapt to the elevation so we could successfully summit without a hyperbaric chamber or helicopter ride. And our plan to go pole, 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 slowly, slowly, slowly in Swahili, 10 hours a day, 7 days straight, worked. And on our last climbing day, we arrived hand in hand to the top of Africa. Almost exactly 2 years later, I stood at the metaphorical summit of my life, a 6-month voluntary deployment to Afghanistan. And then my husband would be home and we could finish our military adventure, safe from any future deployments. And then came the after. Visit from the men in dress blue uniforms walking, pole, 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 up my driveway. This time, instead of standing at 19,342 feet above the world, kissing my true love as we watched the rising sun light up the savannas below, I was alone, collapsing on my front lawn of my suburban home, staring up at the sky, feeling blackness closing in. I guess it is all about perspective.
Thank you so much, August. Nice work. Great. Our next reader is Kristen Van Bodegraven. Kristen Van Bodegraven is a former actor, singer, production manager, and chef, and is the author of And I Can Cook Too, and After the Luau, When the Laughter Dies Down. Her upcoming novel, Fine, will take readers to a world of great perfection, masking big secrets about government imperfections. Today, she reads from her piece in the anthology entitled The Passion of the Truffle.
Thank you. I was driving through the Alps, taking a break from the marriage I'd subtitled The Evaporation of Kristen, and I pondered the freedom. Where would I go? What would I do? Would I fall into the gutter and die? At my destination, Casa del Truffalau, truffle hunter Natali welcomed me in. What makes the truffle so sublime, he said, in broken English, is the sex. Okay. Yes, said Natali. The truffle starts as two separate spores growing alone beneath the same tree. When they meet, they become the truffle, complete, perfect, and whole, emitting the aroma of earth, moss and sex. It was time to taste. With the bite, I was overcome. Sobbing, not the quiet, delicate sobs of a woman in control of her faculties, but the loud, choking sobs of a woman on the edge. I can't believe it, I cried, tears shooting out of my eyes. I've always dreamt it would be this good. Natali jumped from his seat. This woman needs more truffle. Without enough, you will never be happy. I will make sure you are filled with joy. He handed me a bread piled so high with truffle, the slices threatened to topple off. I savored this primordial miracle until a sense of calm surrounded me. Instead of frantic, desperate passion, I now felt peaceful wisdom and power. Said Natali, in the 100 years my family has hunted, you are the only guest who has understood. You possess the passion of the truffle. I sighed, Well, great. That solves everything. But on the drive home, I wondered, what would it be like to meet another person with the passion of the truffle? If we met, would I become complete, perfect, and whole? Thank you.
That's so great. Thank you, Kristen. Our next reader, Randy Sundell. Randy honed her storytelling skills as a children's theater author, a published lyricist, and founder of Rye Toast, writing and performing original musical comedy roasts and tribute poems. Her byline articles and op-eds have been printed in the New York Post and the Gannett Journal-News. Role of a Lifetime is her upcoming memoir. She reads an excerpt from her piece called Once Upon a Mattress.
While watching television in my family room, Alan, a recent widower, began running his fingers up and down, gently stroking my right arm. My 66-year-old body tingled. For months, my head had been shouting at me, saying it was too soon after my husband's death to have a relationship. What would my adult son think? Would my friends think less of me? The message I was getting from my body was less critical. Would leading with my body guide me to a better decision? I needed to test my hypothesis about bodily wisdom. 41 years I had been with one man, and now there was the prospect of another. How do I do this? While pondering my predicament, Alan continued to show me in small, sensitive ways how much he valued me. Every day I was more convinced that I wanted a relationship with him, not as his companion, but as his love. Alan, the proper British gentleman, would have shown patience until he was sure I was receptive and ready. The suggestion had to come from me. Feeling naughty felt nice. I picked the date of the stealth mission. 1 week later, while Alan and I chatted at my kitchen table, I was having a private conference with myself. Are you going to do this, Randy, or are you going to wimp out? There's only one way to find out if what you're feeling is real. I know, but can I do this? He wants you. You know he wants you. You won't be rejected. He's a man. This is what he wants to happen. If you don't do this now, Randy, I will lose all respect for you. But if I go ahead and do this, will Alan lose all respect for me? Say it, Randy, or forever hold your peace. Alan, would you like to take me to bed? Thank you.
Thank you, Randy. I have a feeling I know the answer to that, but I'm not going to ask. All right. Our next reader is Carol Chapman. Carol is a Wyoming girl through and through. She loves reading, writing, and her Welsh corgi Barney. Believing you're never too old to dream, she entered NaNoWriMo at 71, drafting her first novel, Mrs. Belmont's Home for G-Girls. Carol considers writing her fourth career, following teaching, small business ownership, and being a professional volunteer. Today, she reads from her piece, Sparky the Beetle. Carol, take it away.
In 1998, according to the Census Bureau, 269 million people lived in the United States. President Bill Clinton had denied having sexual relations with that woman. And Volkswagen introduced its new Beetle, an updated version of the popular car from the 1950s and 60s. I think I'll turn my pickup into a shop truck for the guys to use if they need to go into town after parts or deliver something small to a job site, Larry said one day, leaning over his desk to chat with me while I sorted through a pile of paperwork. I want to buy one of those new VW Bugs. I couldn't believe my ears. What? Are you certain you want to do that? I asked my 210-pound, 6'2" husband. A quick glance out at the employee parking area showed a lineup of Ford pickups, Chevrolet pickups, and one lone Dodge pickup. There were no cars, and certainly no tiny cars the size of a VW Bug. I couldn't even imagine where we'd park one. Larry had driven a pickup for 29 years, for all but the first year of our marriage. His pickup defined him. He drove a solid maroon four-wheel drive Chevrolet, the only brand he would drive. After he bought the pickup, he ordered a visor like those on semis, a broad canopy designed to shade a driver's eyes against the bright sun. And he had it painted the same maroon color and hung it over the front windshield. Others could spot Larry coming for miles. His pickup visor was his calling card. But a Volkswagen Beetle? Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Love it. Good work. Next, we have Lisa Ransford. Lisa has always wanted to be a writer, but until recently hid much of her work in personal journals. Now she publishes blogs and professional articles for her therapy practice in Denver, Colorado, as well as anthology pieces such as the one published here. Today she reads from Tiny Pink Jewels, an excerpt from her memoir in progress. Lisa, take it away.
As I walked into the restaurant, I heard the sound of women's laughter. I was attending a jewelry party to support a friend's business, though I would have preferred to stay at home after being diagnosed with breast cancer, invasive ductal carcinoma, stage 2A. My parents had died from cancer, and grief had rocked me to the core. My father was diagnosed first, but had kicked the disease and lived 15 more years. My mother was not so lucky. I joined her in comfortable silence as the poison of chemotherapy dripped into her veins before she was put into hospice 10 months later. Shortly before my mom passed, my father and I ate dinner while she slept in the bedroom after an appointment. The cancer is too far gone, he said as he gently laid down his fork, bowed his head, and began to cry. I'd never seen my dad cry before, and this sight just broke me. I reached over and laid my hand on his. Grief surrounded me that day and followed me through the years, all the way to my friend's party. The chatter around me quieted as the host began her presentation. My mom's friend Lisa was diagnosed with breast cancer and is preparing for chemotherapy in a couple of weeks, she began. By donating a portion of the profits tonight, she'll be able to rent a cooling balm, which limits hair loss from chemotherapy. I felt the warmth rush to my cheeks as she and her partner walked toward me. They each handed me a Swarovski necklace, one, a small ball filled with tiny pink jewels, and the second, a small pink breast cancer ribbon. Struggling to speak, tears ran down my cheeks as I accepted these gifts. I wondered if the tender moments I'd spent with each of my parents all those years ago were as powerful to them as this moment was to me. 5 years later and cancer-free, these necklaces represent so much more than a jewel on a chain. They are a talisman of my community and the love that I have for all who supported me through one of the most difficult periods of my life. Thank you.
And I think you may have those on right now, don't you, Lisa? Thank you so much for your reading. Our next reader is Jean Wells. Jean Wells is an administrator turned writer working on her first memoir, Generations of Secrets. She co-authored with Jan Grish a collaborative inquiry on mother-daughter relationships and communication as her master's synthesis project at St. Mary's College of California. Jean now resides in Clayton, California, where she enjoys hiking and bike riding in the nearby Mount Diablo State Park. Today, she reads from her piece, Jeannie with the Light Brown Hair. Thanks, Jean.
Let's go play jacks, my mother whispered to me. She put her finger up to her lips, motioning me to shush. We don't want to wake your brother or sisters from their nap. She tossed the silver-pointed jacks through her long, slender fingers. There was a light ping as the jacks fell on the freshly waxed kitchen floor. My mom won again. She seemed perfect at everything. Beautiful, confident, controlled, and in charge. During times like these, I wanted to grow up and be just like her. I couldn't have imagined that this would be one of the few positive memories I would have of her. Our relationship wasn't all bad. Neither was my mother. She had some good qualities and could be loving at times. Mother-daughter relationships are complex. When a child is born to a teenage girl, ill-equipped to care for herself, let alone another life, things get more complicated. Fortunately for me, my mother had her parents to lean on. It's a girl, Dr. Wood announced as I took my first breath. My mother let her disappointment be known to all in the room when she shouted, I wanted a boy. From that moment, my grandma Lola saw me, she declared, look at her, she's Jeannie with the light brown hair, reciting the title of that famous old 19th century parlor song. And until I started school, I would be called Jeannie. My mother's detachment from me lasted her lifetime. How could any mother not love her child, boy or girl? The last time I spoke to my mother, she told me, I don't love you and I never have. The phone receiver on the other end slammed down. Tears began to stream down my cheeks and I gasped to breathe. Slowly, I put the phone back on the hook, stunned. We never talked again. Our estrangement lasted until her death 20 years later. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean. Beautiful reading. Our next reader is Jill Vanneman. Jill's love of writing began when she learned how to hold a pencil. Her writing has taken many forms in her work as a freelance writer and as an attorney. Recently retired, she's working on her memoir, The Betterment Campaign, from which her anthology story entitled Home is excerpted. This story is set in Seattle in 1979. Jill.
I was sitting at the bar in the Crescent when I saw her come in. Jude had her usual outfit on, green army fatigue pants with an untucked plaid flannel shirt on top. I checked her over, made a silent note, oh, her, she's here a lot, and went back to the Miller long neck I was nursing. No one appeared to drink Miller Lite at the Crescent. I did because my parents' obsession with my weight came across the country with me. I was new to bar sitting. I was new to my sexual orientation. I was new to gay Seattle. She didn't look new. I was trying desperately not to appear new, but that's pretty difficult in a neighborhood bar where everyone knows everyone else. Seattle's version of a female queer Cheers bar. No men were allowed, or at least I never saw any. I don't know if they weren't welcome and knew it, or whether they were officially banned. What I had figured out thus far was that this type of sitting was an art form, and that you didn't go to eat at the bar. A cigarette was a good prop. Somebody might offer you a light and then slide her beer over and start talking to you. Or if you were more adventuresome, you tried to attach yourself to a group and listen to the banter, hoping it wasn't obvious. Jude was a real regular. Lots of people seemed to know her. She sometimes came with her friend Boo. The two of them would shoot pool. Now I watched Jude lean over the pool table, cue stick in hand, a still burning cigarette stuck behind her ear, take her shot. The yellow 2-ball banked off the opposite bumper and dropped into the side pocket, She stuck the cigarette back in her mouth and lined up her next shot. It was then that I put my quarter on the table, signifying that I would play the next game against the winner of the contest between her and Boo. Thank you.
Thanks, Jill. I love that cigarette behind the ear. Our next reader is Lauren Trantham. Lauren is the founder and executive director of Ride My Road, an anti-human trafficking organization that combines motorcycles and photography to support survivors. Lauren has photographed more than 80 survivors of human trafficking, and her writing has been published in Iron and Air. Her chapter is entitled Brilliant. Lauren?
I met Leah in the 9th grade when we were growing up in Alaska. Leah instantly drew me in with her deeply sweet confidence. We became very close very quickly. Her light brown hair was impossibly thick and always pulled back into a messy bun on the top of her head. Her strong soccer player legs carried her on and off the field with notable ease. Leah was smart, funny, kind, and irresistibly lovable, with a coffee cup forever in her hand and a smile that, when directed in your way, made you feel like you were in on some grand secret. Growing up in Alaska made us wild and left us in awe of the world in all the right ways. Leah taught me many important things about life just by being who she was. One December day, while the snow was gently falling from the sky, we traipsed out of our local grocery store into the darkness of late afternoon. As we walked, our arms were linked together for stability against any black ice when Leah suddenly stopped and knelt. She got really quiet while I waited to see what she was looking at. I heard her gasp. "Leah?" I asked. "Come look at this," she whispered. I knelt beside her and she pointed delicately to the snow. "See how the street lights are bouncing through the snowflakes like a prism? They look like diamonds." Together, squatted side by side, we drew our faces in closer to the snowbank, breathlessly peering into the fluff. I turned to look at Leah and I was startled to see tears avalanching down the mounds of her cheeks. I stared at her, bewildered, as she then turned and looked at me full in the face. "It's so beautiful. Snow is so beautiful." We were only 17 that day, but I knew in that moment I desperately wanted to feel as deeply as Leah did. If I could care about anything in the way that she cared about street lamps lighting up a snowflake in the dark, then I knew I would be okay. A few years later, I got a snowflake tattoo to remind me of Leah and the level of love that can be had for this world. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. It's beautiful. Next, I'd like to invite Amanda Stebbert. Amanda Heath Stebbert is a Seattle-based storyteller, podcaster, and producer who believes that the more personal the story, the more universal the impact. Her upcoming memoir, Norwegian Wood, portrays a heart-wrenching yet humor-filled story of a girl searching for identity amid a fundamentalist church community. Today, she reads from her anthology piece, which is called My Mother's Crown. Amanda?
Had they really called my name? I was sitting cross-legged on the itchy carpeted floor of a stuffy megachurch sanctuary, counting the hours until I could go home, when I heard someone announce my name. I stood up. The girls to my left and right, more than 200 taking part in this church camp with me, began elbowing me and pushing me forward. My eyes locked onto the huge projector screen over the stage, swaying forward and back from the small breeze. I stared up at the collection of 3-foot-high words weaving in and slightly out of focus. Miss Sugar and Spice, 1984. The Sugar and Spice retreat, where preteen Assemblies of God girls come to learn more about Jesus and build godly relationships, had just crowned a Miss Sugar and Spice, and it was me. I would have preferred a camping trip, which is what the boys got to do. I had no hope that something titled Sugar or Spice was going to teach me life skills, make me lifelong friends, or bring me closer to God. And now that I was stuck being crowned at this stupid thing, I was on stage enduring the discomfort of 200 pairs of strange eyes staring right at me. The MC continued to speak to the crowd as two unfamiliar middle-aged women pulled a pink sash over my head, placed a tiara atop my mop of unwashed curls, and handed me an honest-to-goodness bouquet of red roses. I scanned the multitude of small, mostly white faces framed in braids, pigtails, headbands, and barrettes. What does any of this have to do with church? Wait a minute, I thought. This award couldn't be about achievement because there is no way I worked harder than any of these other girls. Neither did I have a better attitude. This had to be a popularity contest, plain and simple. Popular was something I had never experienced before. Despite the divots in my head and the pokey thorns against my bare arms, popular was starting to feel pretty good. Ignoring the crooked teeth that usually kept my smile closed, I let loose a full, toothy princess grin. Maybe being a girl wasn't so bad after all. Thank you.
Despite the divots in our head. Thank you, Amanda. That's fantastic. Okay. Our next reader is Naomi Stenberg. Naomi's poems and essays have appeared in college journals and in the Seattle Times. In 2007, For Culture, a King County community arts and culture agency selected one of her poems to go on the inside of a Seattle Metro bus, the number 13, heading up Queen Anne Hill. Naomi has a chapbook called On the Wire, and her story, If I Could Turn Back Time, is about the last day of her parents' lives. Naomi.
It was the last run I'd gone on knowing that I had parents or thinking I had them. I had wakened that morning feeling strange, off, weird. I couldn't shake that feeling. Finally, in the early evening, I went out for a run. I was in better shape then, so I ran for an hour easily, ran and ran, straight up a steep hill from Lake Washington near the Montlake Cut in Seattle. My legs surged me forward. I remember how fit I was, the joy in my body. August 20th, 1997. You remember the day. You always remember the day. The trees were brilliantly green. The sun was warm on my face. I finally felt better. I was whistling when I came up my front steps. I think about that moment, how I was whistling, how if only I hadn't picked up my phone to see if I had any messages, I might have had parents for a few minutes longer or thought I had parents. But I walked in and picked up my phone. The first message was from my sister, Vanjie. Her voice sounded like someone had let the air out of her lungs. I'm going to the hospital now, she said. Would you like a ride? You just know. Emily Dickinson wrote, my life closed twice before it's closed. You just know when your life is closing. I tore up my apartment looking for my sister's number. When I found it, I called her. She wasn't home. Her husband, my brother-in-law, Howie, said gently, are you sitting down? I sat down. My mom and dad had been in a car accident an hour earlier. My mom was dead. My dad had been airlifted from Lake Stevens to Harborview in Seattle. He was in a coma. He died later that day. Thank you.
Thank you, Naomi, for your brave reading. Really appreciate it. Our next reader is Holly Miller. Holly Miller enjoys writing short stories and poetry. Living the Dream and The Dollies were published in the Village Square magazine of Writers Village University in 2020 and 2021. Her memoir is currently in revisions. Her sometimes humorous stories demonstrate victory over a difficult past. Holly lives in Whidbey Island, Washington, and today she reads an excerpt from her story, The Last Time. Holly?
Strong hands grip my throat and squeeze. I can't breathe. The baby slides down my body onto the floor. The big hands hold steady until I black out. I come to as my head is being slammed against the full diaper pail. Shitty water spatters across me and the floor where my baby lies, screaming. Shoving me one last time, he threatens, if you ever say you're going to leave me again, I will kill you and the kids. Stepping over the baby, he leaves the room. I gather my kids to me. It's going to be okay. He'll calm down, I assure them in my hoarse voice. while thinking, how can I get us out of this mess? I need a drink. Fixing a glass of brandy, I down it quickly and make another. I have to leave for work soon. I call out to the backyard where he plays ball with the kids as if everything is fine. You ain't going nowhere, he replies. They'll know that something's wrong if I don't go. I never call out. Reluctantly, he agrees. The kids are staying with me and you'd better keep your mouth shut. Walking into the restaurant, I put on my happy face and help myself to a drink at the bar. The mirror shows red finger marks curling around my neck. Shit, I should have brought a scarf or something. I'll have to keep my head down and turned away. Keep busy, head down. When I return home, he and the kids are in bed. Stalling for as long as possible, I don my nightgown and slide quietly in next to him. You better have kept your mouth shut, comes his wide awake voice.
Thank you, Holly. That there is a strong woman reading to us. Our next reader, Carrie Kenner. Carrie Kenner has been writing all her life, stories as a child, then as a technical writer, and now a copywriter, author, and ghostwriter. The Politics of Being a Doula is an excerpt from her How to Be a Doula book entitled Become a Birth Doula, a comprehensive training manual for birth doulas. Carrie.
My client, Kelly, had been laboring for hours. Now she was finally pushing her baby out. Mid-push, the door opened. Doctor, the patient in 402 is headed for a C-section. Can you come? A nurse asked from the open doorway. It's going fast here, the doctor replied. Call in Dr. B. Kelly was confused by what she was hearing. She didn't know there was a nurse across the room. Her eyes were closed. She was consumed by pushing. The nurse, still holding the door open to the hallway, kept talking. Well, Dr. B is at the clinic. Should I call him? Yeah, I'm kind of busy here. Kelly's eyes popped open and her eyes found mine. What's going on? She cried. There are too many voices. Please tell them to be quiet. So I did. Shh, I hissed into the room. I turned back to Kelly and heard the door close. I assumed the nurse had left. To be honest, I was afraid to look. You see, doulas are not supposed to tell medical staff what to do, even if their clients ask them to. Me shushing the nurse was a no-no. An hour later, the room was quiet and calm as Kelly admired her new baby. Then in walked the nurse who had intruded earlier. You, she said, with a witch's gnarled finger motioning for me to come. Is something wrong? Kelly asked. I wasn't sure what was wrong, but I could tell something wasn't right. Kelly, I'll be right back, I said. I approached the nurse. Follow me, she said, heading out the door. As soon as the door clicked behind us, Witchy Poo spun around and poked her gnarly finger in my face. You do not shush me. We had a situation and I needed to consult with the doctor. You don't interfere in my managing care. I'm sorry I shushed you, I said. My client was having a hard time hearing with all the commotion in the room. She asked me to tell everyone to be quiet, but I shouldn't have shushed you. As I would be reminded many times during my years of working as a doula, diplomacy is a doula's superpower. We work in a healthcare system that's designed for efficiency, not thoughtfulness. Until that changes, doulas will be needed to safeguard the sacred space of birth. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carrie. I so appreciate it. Next, we have John Jorza. Having learned to write at 7 and occasionally finding himself jotting down random thoughts and ideas over his next 66 years, John then decided to write a book, Finding Another Way. John's book is about his adult life efforts to stop his own violent tendencies with the intention of assisting others to do the same. Today, he reads from his story, Run Toward the Lion's Roar. Take it away, John.
What just happened, John? Steve, my PTSD's therapist, asked, as he always had, after waving a short black white-tipped wand right and left, a foot in front of my eyes. I described the internal mental vision I had just moments before. I told him of the infant me forgiving my father and all my male ancestors, as well as the doppelganger versions of myself spanning my entire life and how they all merged back into my tiny body. I'm all of me now, Steve. I'm not divided into parts or only the good or bad versions of myself. You're whole, he softly commented. I nodded my understanding and slowly began to move my body, transitioning back fully into the present time and place of his office. But what does it mean? I asked. His kind eyes glowed. I'd say you experienced integration, John. You took all the parts of yourself and merged them together to make yourself whole. That's quite the accomplishment. Congratulations. I left Steve's office that day transformed. I felt free, unburdened, at peace. I had finally gotten to the origin or source of my disproportional anger, back to the decisions of a traumatized 10-month-old baby. This session of EMDR had allowed me to take further responsibility for my habituated misinterpretations of both my fear and reactions. I would change my beliefs, thoughts, and most importantly, my behaviors to ones of respect, love, and understanding, coming from all of me, who I really am. Love. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John. Good work. Our next reader is Gloria Jackson Nefertiti. Gloria is a Seattle-based author and a recently diagnosed autistic adult. Her upcoming memoir is called, and this is the first time I've ever had to say it all together, A Different Drum, a Black autistic polyamorous mentally ill former fundamentalist Christian/cult member and breast survivor who just wants to fit in. She is reading from her story, Belonging. Take it away, Gloria.
Thank you. For the longest time, my mother couldn't seem to get pregnant, and nobody knew why. I later learned that well-meaning relatives would tell her, "Now the Bible says to be fruitful and multiply." This wouldn't be the first time that they took a Bible verse out of context. They would also say things like, "The Bible says that children are a blessing." I personally think that orgasms are a blessing, but that's just me. As long as I could remember, I assumed I'd have children. Didn't everybody? But then I also assumed I'd marry a preacher. Eventually, I realized that I didn't want children. My dysfunctional family background had a lot to do with that. And I'm sure that my choice not to be a mother became just one more reason for me to feel like I didn't belong. There was a book that I frequently checked out of my high school library. It was called How to Get a Teenage Boy and What to Do with Him When You Get Him by the late Ellen Peck. The book did absolutely no good, by the way. But I mentioned the author because I remember that she was an advocate for child-free living who founded the National Organization for Non-Parents, or NON. In 1995, I finally made the decision to get my tubes tied, and I can't believe the grief the surgeon gave me. Here I was in my late 30s, and the doctor was asking me things like, "Well, you know you're making the right decision. How do you know you won't change your mind later? How do you know?" Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "Look," I said, "are you going to do the surgery or not?" "Oh, I'll still do it," he said. "I just wanted to make sure you were aware of everything that was involved. That's all." It's amazing that a man, even if he is a doctor, would have any idea what it's like to think about having children. What's more, it's audacious for a male doctor to assume he has any kind of say over what I choose to do with my own body. Thank you.
Thank you, Gloria. Good work. Our next reader is Sean Dwyer. Sean Thomas Dwyer is an award-winning writer who has published 11 stories, including 5 in anthologies and 1 in the final issue of Clover. He is the author of A Quest for Tears: Surviving Traumatic Brain Injury. Sean hosts a monthly open mic at Village Books, who is hosting us today in Bellingham, Washington. And he's reading from his anthology piece, All That Distance. Sean?
Matt Morgan called his dad, who picked up on the first ring. Hey, kid. Hey, Dad. I didn't wake anyone, did I? Not this late. Your mom's already out doing garage sales, and I'm on my 3rd cup of coffee. Good, because you'll need it. I have a question. Should I be sitting or standing? What are you doing now? I'm sitting on the front porch, watching the Canada geese fly north and throwing Matt his rubber bone. It's covered in slobber, of course. Yuck. Well, if you're sitting, that'll work. Matt took a deep breath. Can I write your story? A bark came through the phone and nothing else. Then a slow exhale. Now, Matt, of course you can write my story. You've written 3 books, so you can write it. Do you mean, may I write your story? Yes, Father, that's what I mean. Matt stung his tongue out in reply, wishing his dad were there to see it. Raucous laughter burst through the phone. I love doing that to you. Yes, you do. Geez, Mitchell, don't drop it on my pet jeans. Now I'll have to change. Mitch barked, his yips fading as Matt visualized him running into the yard after his bone. Sorry, Matt. Needed a second to ponder. Do you think writing about our skeletons will enhance your career? Matt thought. It was his turn to pause. My career didn't come to mind. 2 points did. First, Jill has been curious about why I know so little about the situation. And second, I love you and want to know more about what makes you who you are. Another long silence. Matt heard his father clear his throat. Well, I'd say that's a tall order, kid. There's more to getting permission than you might think. You'll have to interview your grandfather, of course, and my mom and your other grandmother. I had a dream about them this morning. Tell me, was the woman in the dream white or black? Black. Then perhaps it's meant to be. Write the story, and I hope I won't have to break your heart by chickening out. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Our next reader is Noelle Davenport. After years of career shifts and address changes, Noelle landed in Bellingham, Washington, where she works as an instructional designer, fledgling memoirist, and sometimes blogger. She strives to blend humor and vulnerability while highlighting the wonders and absurdities of everyday life. You can read her work in True Stories, the Narrative Project, Volume 4. Her piece in this anthology is called Wanna Go Further? Noelle.
Alone in the elevator, Larry stepped closer until his face was directly in front of mine. Are we gonna kiss? Oh my God. Larry was the cute guy I'd spent hours with over long distance phone calls. I didn't really know him, but I liked him. I liked him. Larry was in town with his dad on a business trip, and I had just had dinner with him at their hotel. When he led me into the elevator, I felt excited to be getting attention from a boy like I had watched other 13-year-old girls getting. Finally, it's my turn. With each kiss, he nudged me back until I felt the elevator wall. Want to go further? He asked. I stood there. What does that even mean? Go further? Yeah, sure, I said quietly. I had no idea just how much I'd be giving away with those 3 words. Larry grinned and switched the elevator off. We slumped onto the grimy, carpeted floor. I felt him awkwardly grabbing fistfuls of jeans and underwear, tugging down hard. Wait, what is happening? Is he pulling my pants down? The weight of his body pinned my hair between me and the filthy carpet, wrenching my head back with his forward movements. Each painful round of grunt and thrust brought the elevator music to a frenzied crescendo, and created a light show behind my tightly closed eyelids. Then Larry's dead fish weight was on top of me. Is he done? Did I just have sex? Ow. So does that mean he likes me? As the elevator doors opened, I hugged myself tightly and wondered, is this what I'm going to have to do to get attention from boys? Thank you.
Thank you, Noelle. A worthy question. Our next reader is Melanie Cool. Health and happiness expert Melanie Cool looked in the mirror before turning 50 and hated the sad face staring back at her. She decided to change her life despite the obstacles she faced. Melanie's upcoming memoir, entitled Pretty Plus: The Story of a Tragic Optimist, invites readers to join her on a healing journey from surviving to thriving. Today, she reads a piece about her beloved dog, Hobie.
The perfect 13 by 9 pan of bubbling white chicken enchiladas came out of the oven. 350 degrees of goodness, bold but not too spicy, creamy but not too rich, ultimate deliciousness. I left the pan on the stove to cool and went to fold some laundry. I came back to the kitchen 30 minutes later and I halted, stunned. The pan was on the floor, empty. It took a moment for me to accept what I was seeing. The enchiladas were gone. Hobie, I accused my 95-pound, 10-year-old golden retriever. Did you eat my enchiladas? Hobie smacked his lips. What the hell? I threw my arms up in the air. Hobie thumped his tail. I immediately called the vet. They told me to give Hobie peroxide to make him throw up because dogs should not eat white chicken enchiladas. A comedy act ensued of me following Hobie around the backyard, giving him doses of peroxide. He didn't like it, and neither did I. After 4 shots of peroxide, Hobie finally started heaving. The next thing that happened is cemented in my memory forever. Hobie puked up my perfect pan of white chicken enchiladas. I'd imagined a pile of barf, like a little mountain or something. Nope. Hobie puked up those enchiladas in a perfect line. So perfect, they looked exactly as they had in the pan, except covered in foamy peroxide and smelling like puke. Needless to say, I will never make white chicken enchiladas again. Thank you.
Neither will I. Thank you, Melanie. Our next reader is Martha Comfort. A master mariner, dive master, and offshore sailor, Captain Comfort has written extensively for yachting publications throughout the US and Asia. Her newest book in progress, Shaman on the High Seas, is a plucky tale of encounters with the numinous. A globe-girdling adventure of heartbreak, sobriety, and spiritual awakening amid the ancient wisdom keepers of South America. She reads from her story today, Across the Gulf Stream by Sailboat. Martha?
Just the month before, as I'd committed to join Captain Skip on the voyage, the idea of a jaunty sail across the Gulf Stream had seemed like a terrific lark. How tough could it be to sail a mere 470 miles from South Carolina to the warm, inviting waters of the Abaco Islands? Seeking a final dose of confidence before I left home, I had consulted with a sage delivery skipper. You should be okay, Martha, he'd advised me. Just don't cross the Gulf Stream when the wind is out of the north. With his words echoing in my head, I'd packed my bikini along with my sea boots and foul weather gear and boarded the plane for Charleston. Now the sailboat was well offshore in boisterous seas as thunderclaps boomed in the distance. Soon a deluge swept across us, bucketing down rain and smoothing the waters into a hissy mist of spray. Captain Skip and I kept watch from behind the canvas dodger, monitoring our course, and I basked in the immense beauty of the ocean. But over the next few hours, as the wind moved solidly into the north, the boat's motion shifted from a bearable glide up and over each wave to the pounding disequilibrium atop a bucking bronco as spray flew every which way. On this night, the sailor's adage of using one hand for the boat turned into a sharp command for a three-point brace. We gripped tightly with both hands and at least one leg in order to avoid being thrown around like rag dolls. Much later, as dawn finally crept in, I huddled in the cockpit, dazzled, wet to my core, weary, and dazed by the roar of the winds in the rigging and the towering waves. I found a quiet corner within myself to reflect. Why did this stretch of water call to me? And why, oh, why did I answer the call? I had yet to know how my inner demons would spring forth from these tumultuous waters. Thank you.
Thank you, Martha. I look forward to hearing more. All right, our next reader is Isabel Castro. Isabel Castro is a first-generation Costa Rican American, Ayurvedic practitioner and avid bringer of sunshine. As a serial dabbler in arts, wellness, adventure, and culture, she offers a refreshing and insightful perspective. In writing about health, family, and relationships, Isabel encourages readers to embrace the fullness of life. She will be reading from her story, Further and Further into Love. Isabel?
Yeah, thank you, Cami. Please note that when I refer to Papa in my piece, I'm talking about my dad. 2.5 months after my dad's terminal cancer diagnosis, I was up, keeping him company in the morning. Papa had become bedridden and our conversations were limited. It seemed like part of him was already on the other side. Suddenly, he started to yell, "I love you, I love you, I love you," while waving his hands in the air like an orchestra conductor. He kept repeating, "I love you," and gazing off into the distance, occasionally looking my way. I felt swept up by his enthusiasm and started shouting along with him. My sister Andrea and my 6-year-old nephew Noah heard us screaming and came running up the stairs and into the bedroom. They joined in, yelling, "I love you, I love you, I love you," in loud, boisterous voices, jumping around and flailing their arms. My father shifted verses to yelling, "I love Punta Arenas, I love Punta Arenas, I love Punta Arenas." Punta Arenas was a major Costa Rican port city, the first place he'd ever seen the ocean. He was 17 then and had invited his 11-year-old sister Olga to drive with him a few hours out of San Jose, where they lived. That day, he'd grabbed her hand, calling her to run with him along the sand, feet skimming the water. He finished from his bedside with a round of, "I love everything, I love everything, I love everything," as we followed along, jumping, flailing, and yelling. Then we gathered around Papa's bedside to catch our breath, relishing in the joy he'd brought to the moment. Papa lay back with his eyes closed, looking satisfied with himself, like he was glad he'd gotten that love out of his body. Papa modeled what it could be like to surrender during the most difficult time in one's life. Through all of his physical and spiritual challenges, he leaned further and further into love, yelling, "I love everything, I love everything, I love everything," and encouraged us to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Isabel. So beautiful. Our next reader is Linda Bershia Battle. Linda is the matriarch in her Dakota Sioux family. Born and raised on the Fork Peck Reservation in Montana, she has spent her life working with Indigenous and minority children in impoverished areas as a teacher, social worker, and counselor. She has been recording family stories for several decades to include in her memoir in progress, Resilience. She is reading from her anthology piece, A Fork in the Road. Linda?
As an anthropology major in the late 60s, I was overjoyed to be in a practicum at an excavation near the university. That first afternoon, mapping and measuring out the site filled me with pride. I'd made it. I was fulfilling my dream. As my classmates and I finished up that first day, Dr. Davis, our instructor, surprised me by saying, "Come by my office tomorrow." The next day, I hurried across the campus. "Miss Schutz," he greeted me as he flicked his wrist at a nearby chair. He was a youthful PhD with dark curls ringing the lower crown of his balding head. He pursed his lips before he spoke. "Your presence in the field created a difficult situation." I thought about the other students, all male, wondering where this conversation was going. "I'm not sure what you mean. You're the only female in class. Archaeology is a male-dominated field. While women can occasionally find jobs, careers, it's unusual." He looked at my blank face. "Oh, hell, young lady, this is a man's field. Your presence on the site made it uncomfortable for the men when they had to relieve themselves. This is about them having to pee? Well, they had to leave the area to look for privacy. Have you considered a more female-friendly major? Education? Nursing? Business?" He swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing, his tone changing from faintly apologetic to authoritarian. "You won't be returning to my class or the field." He stood, signed, and handed me his class drop ad slip. I looked through blurry eyes at the small slip of paper that would change my future. I kept my head down so he couldn't see my tears. "Thank you," slipped from my lips, and then muttering, "for God knows what," I left the modern light-filled building that housed his office and his antiquated sexist ideas. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. I said in the comments, he didn't know what a badass you are. Our next reader is PJ Bevan. PJ spent 15 years as an animal trainer and zookeeper, working with everything from sea otters to elephants. She's now a behavior change coach specializing in combating compassion fatigue for animal care professionals. PJ has several fitness-related books to help people make fitness fun, engaging, and impactful. Today, she will be reading from her anthology piece, Watato's Rumble. Correct me if I didn't pronounce that name right, PJ.
And unfortunately, my camera is not working right now.
Okay.
Video.
I'm just going to listen in then.
So I will just start reading. When I first walked into the elephant barn at Woodland Park Zoo, I was awestruck by the bond the other keepers shared with Bamboo, Chai, and Watoto. Each elephant had their own individual personalities. The one who captured my heart immediately was Watoto. She was the African elephant with a brash and impulsive personality. Watoto had a particular way of showing certain keepers she liked them. She produced a low rumbling sound, a purr of sorts that you could feel all the way down to your bones. To me, there wasn't anything not to like about this larger-than-life personality. Unfortunately, my love was unrequited. Watoto was notorious for not liking women. I'll admit the idea of an 8,000-pound elephant barreling towards me with malicious intent was intimidating. But even if she didn't like me, I needed Watoto to at least work with me. To compensate for me being a female, I kept our training sessions short and sweet, and I stayed positive and encouraging throughout each and every one. Soon, my consistent attitude with Watoto brought a distinct reputation among my colleagues. I was the go-to keeper when she was being stubborn, as my patient attitude calmed her. However, the best reward came from Watoto herself. One morning, I was opening the barn to start my shift. I went to check on the girls, and Chai sauntered over to me, begging for her morning treat. What happened next made my heart skip a beat. Watoto gently nudged Chai out of the way. She lowered her head down to my level, and then she rumbled. I looked around the barn expecting someone else behind me, but there was no one there. She was rumbling for me. From that day on, even when Watoto was obstinate or completely ignored me, I knew my patience and consistency had paid off in the biggest way possible. Watoto was my girl, always and forever. And with one little rumble, I knew I was hers. Thank you.
Thank you, PJ. Love that. We have two more readers, friends. Our next reader is Tina Anderson. Tina Anderson is a writer of young adult fiction. Her upcoming novel, Justice for Jackie, takes readers on a journey of childhood abuse and life or death struggle for survival. Tina lives with her wife, Heather, in Ferndale, Washington, where she spends her time writing and making jewelry. This is an excerpt from her novel from a piece called The Runaway. Tina?
Here. Jackie felt scared as she stepped on the train. She sat back in her seat and let her mind wander to what made her decide that running away was her only choice. It all started when her parents began hitting Maddie too, her brother. It was his first day of kindergarten. He had got on the wrong bus and was late. When he got home, he was slapped across the face. "I will protect you, Maddie." In that moment, she promised to never leave him again. She emailed her Aunt Mary to tell her that they had started hitting Maddie and begged her to come home. Her mom found out. "What's this?" Jackie froze as she forgot to delete the email. "I asked you a question, young lady." "An email I sent to Mary," Jackie whispered. "You talked to her about our discipline?" "This was the first time." "When did she give you this email address?" "The night before she left for San Francisco." "And this is the first time in 3 years? Why now?" Jackie felt that honesty would be best, but she was very wrong. "Because you hit Maddie. So you don't approve of our brand of discipline. Tough shit." Jackie's mom grabbed her arm and slapped her across the face and tugged off her own belt before throwing Jackie into a chair and whacking her repeatedly with the sharp metal end. Jackie screamed each time the belt hit. "Stop your screaming or you'll get worse." Jackie bit her lip and didn't make a sound. Just then Maddie walked through the front door. "Mom, what are you doing?" Maddie shouted, his face crumpling. "Get yourself to your room or you'll be next." Jackie looked at him and motioned silently to go. Maddie ran upstairs. "At least your brother listens," Jackie's mom said. She whacked her a few more times. "Get yourself upstairs and don't come down again tonight." The train shuddered as it rounded a bend, jolting Jackie's mind away from the day her mother had beaten her and back to her new reality. A runaway, alone on a train, but free. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. Powerful story. Good work. Our final reader is Jacqueline Semlak. Jacqueline lives and works in Minneapolis, Minnesota. As a teacher, her favorite subject is writing. Seeing her students become young authors inspires her. Jacqueline enjoyed reading memoirs from a young age, devouring the genre before it was popular. She has long anticipated writing her own memoir and is excited to see it come to fruition. Her piece is called Riding High. Jacqueline?
Thanks, Kimmy. I waited for him to pick me up outside my neighbor's house instead of my own. I didn't want my date to know where I lived in case he turned out to be a serial killer. We had joked about my apprehensions via Bumble, the online dating site. I was nervous after all. Less than 2 years before my 35th birthday, I wasn't thrilled to be entering the online dating scene for the first time. When my date and I discovered that we lived right near each other, he messaged, "Holy moly, are you making fun of me?" I said. I thought he was mocking me because holy moly happened to be one of my favorite expressions. But how would he know if we hadn't even met? When he offered to pick me up, I agreed and then thought otherwise. "Wait, are you a serial killer?" I messaged. "Are you?" he immediately replied. "Nobody has offered to pick me up before," I typed back. "Isn't picking someone up what you're supposed to do on a date?" The yellow message on screen made me smile. I took the risk, as I tend to do, and for the rest of the night, the smile didn't leave my face. An intruder has been coming into my life from the time I was 18 years old. When it first showed up, it was a raging, irritable monster. The free spirit of my youth abruptly turned into a snappy bitch. I yelled at my mom, struggled to get out of bed, and had a ravishing need to eat every last square in the blondie pan. My family played it off as me being a hormonal teenager, but looking back, it was not normal to be that mean to my family, to have that much difficulty getting out of bed, and to be that crazed about getting my hands on sugar. In college, fits of sobbing, often in public, became normal for me. And so I ebbed and flowed through the years from the snappy bitch to the crazed sugar addict to a sobbing mess, and eventually a numbed out blob. The intruder, I've come to recognize, manifests as a deep ache I can't fulfill. I try to make the ache go away, but my methods are haphazard, probably owing to the chaotic wiring of my brain. I spent years in active pursuit of the ever-elusive happiness. If I found it, I thought, I could rid myself of depression, the intruder, for good. But it turns out depression wasn't what I was battling, and happiness wasn't what I was seeking. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacqueline. And thank you, everyone. I'd like to invite everyone to turn their videos back on so that we can virtually applaud each other. And I'll invite Claire to come back as well. You guys just give each other some twinkle fingers. And I know everybody's been chatting and saying congratulations and good work. A lot of brave stories here. I could not be prouder of every single one of you. I know the hard work that went into this. And I'm excited for our after party. So, which we'll do BYOB in another location. Claire, do you want to jump on and say any final words?
I just want to thank everybody and congratulate all of the readers. That was wonderful. I didn't miss a word, and you had me on the edge of my stool the whole time. It was wonderful. It was such a great roller coaster of feelings. So thank you all. Well done, all of you. And thank you to the Narrative Project. This is always fun to host you guys. And I put the link in the chat to where folks can go to the Village Books website and purchase books. I just did it again.
Great.
And remember, this is the book, this beautiful one right here.
I love the cover.
And this event has been recorded. It will be on our YouTube channel in a couple of days. So I think that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Village Books, and all of you who read. You're brave souls. You did it. You're published authors. Congratulations. And thank you to our audience for attending. So you all can unmute yourselves and say thank you and goodbye. And have a great afternoon, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, all.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Great job.
That was easy.
Nice work, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
All right, with that, we're signing off. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.